It was 2 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of voices. I was staying in my sister's house, a place I thought was safe, a place I thought was family. I had been living there for a few months since retiring early from the army. My sister, Charlotte, told me I could stay as long as I needed, and she made it sound like she was doing me this huge favor. She insisted I shouldn't live alone, not after my husband's death, not with my army baggage. I thought she was being protective. I thought she cared. That night proved how wrong I was. I could hear her voice downstairs, low but sharp. I leaned closer to my bedroom door. She was on the phone. At first, I didn't catch the words, just the tone. Then it came through clear. "Tomorrow we'll file the guardianship papers. Everything is ready. She won't have a say anymore." My heart dropped. Guardianship? Against me? I pressed my hand against the doorframe, trying not to breathe too loud. Charlotte's husband, Richard, mumbled something in the background. She hissed back at him, "Don't worry. Once we get control, the house and her army benefits are ours to manage. The court will believe she's unstable. PTSD, memory lapses easy to prove." My stomach turned. That was my own sister. The same woman who hugged me when I came back from deployments, who told me I was strong, who said she'd always be there for me. And here she was, plotting to take away my freedom and my life, as if I were some broken toy to put away on a shelf. I backed up from the door and sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. Every warning sign I'd ignored suddenly made sense. The way Charlotte always asked about my finances. The way she insisted on helping with my paperwork. The way Richard made jokes about crazy army vets. I thought it was rude humor. Now I knew it was strategy. I had maybe a few hours before they slept and woke up ready to drag me into their plan. I had to move. I pulled the old duffel bag from the closet, the same one I carried overseas. Inside, I stuffed my ID, my army discharge papers, and the medical records I'd kept from my last evaluation. Those papers said clearly I was of sound mind, fit to manage my own life. Those records might be the only thing that could save me later. I added some cash I'd stashed away, a prepaid phone I never used, and my keys. No clothes beyond what I was wearing, nothing that would slow me down. I slipped on my boots muscle memory from years of early morning alerts. Quiet, fast, efficient. Every step toward the back door felt like it echoed. The floorboards creaked like they wanted to betray me. I froze each time, holding my breath, waiting for Charlotte to storm upstairs. But the voices kept low and steady, like they were planning my funeral. My chest felt tight, but my head was clear. This wasn't a drill. This was survival. I reached the kitchen, hand trembling on the back door handle. I remembered when I was deployed, sneaking out of compounds in the dead of night, every nerve on fire, every sound a possible trap. The difference was, this wasn't Afghanistan or Iraq. This was my sister's suburban house in Ohio. And yet the fear was the same. Maybe worse. Because over there, I knew who the enemy was. Here, the enemy shared my blood. I pushed the door open, the cool night air rushing in. I stepped outside and closed it softly behind me. The yard looked quiet, the neighbor's porch light glowing faintly. I walked quickly through the grass, cutting across the street before anyone could notice. Each step further from that house felt like I could finally breathe again. I didn't have a plan beyond getting out. My car was parked 2 blocks away. I'd left it there because Charlotte complained about the driveway being too crowded. At the time, I thought she just liked things neat. Now, I wondered if she'd been thinking ahead, trying to make sure I didn't have easy access to leave when I needed to. The walk felt endless, but finally I reached the car. I unlocked it as quietly as possible and slid inside. For a moment, I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel. My whole body shook, but not from fear alone. It was rage. Rage that the people I trusted most were about to strip me of my dignity. Rage that my years of service, my sacrifices, meant nothing to them except a payday. I started the engine, keeping the headlights off until I was well down the block. My mind raced. Where could I go at 3 in the morning? A hotel? Too easy to track. A friend's place? I couldn't risk dragging anyone else into this mess. I decided on the one place I knew they'd never look. A cheap motel off the interstate, the kind that didn't ask questions as long as you paid cash. The drive felt like forever, but the silence in the car gave me time to think. My sister's words replayed over and over. She won't have a say anymore. They wanted the court to believe I was incompetent. They wanted to lock me into a guardianship where I'd lose every right to make my own choices. That wasn't just betrayal, it was war. I pulled into the motel lot, the neon sign buzzing overhead. I paid for a room with cash, no ID required. The clerk didn't care, didn't ask. I liked it that way. In the small, dim room, I finally let myself collapse on the bed, but sleep didn't come. My mind was wide awake, scanning through every detail, every hint I'd ignored. Charlotte's fake smiles, Richard's sarcastic comments, the way they whispered in the kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. It had all been leading to this. At some point, I sat up, dug through my bag, and pulled out my army papers again. I read the lines twice, 3 times. Capable of independent living. No mental impairments. That was proof. But it wouldn't be enough. Not against forged medical notes, or a smooth story told in court. I'd need more. I'd need backup. As I sat there in that ugly motel chair, the weight of what had just happened hit me fully. I wasn't just running from my sister. I was running from a trap carefully set to destroy me. And if I didn't figure out my next move fast, they'd find me, drag me back, and finish what they started. I sat in that motel room, staring at the cracked ceiling, knowing there was no way I could close my eyes. My body was exhausted, but my mind was locked in overdrive. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. Every car door outside had me bracing for Charlotte to burst in with some fake police report about her unstable sister. I pulled the thin blanket tighter around me, but it didn't stop the chill running through me. Images kept flooding back, not just from that night, but from the months before, all the signs I'd brushed off. When I first moved into Charlotte's house, I thought I was lucky to have her. After 20 years in the Army, I came home with a medical retirement check, a folded flag from my husband's funeral, and a lot of silence in my head. Charlotte showed up with open arms. "Stay with us," she said. "You don't need to live alone right now. Family takes care of family." I believed her. At first, it really did feel like family. She'd cook dinner and tell me to relax on the couch. Richard would ask me about deployments like he actually cared. For a little while, I thought maybe this was the stability I needed. Then the tone started to shift. The questions weren't about how I was doing, but about what I had. Charlotte would casually ask, "So, do you get that Army check every month? Is it enough to live on?" I'd brush it off with vague answers, but she kept circling back. Richard wasn't subtle either. "Man, the government really pays you guys a lot for just sitting around now, huh?" He'd laugh, but his eyes stayed sharp, like he was measuring me. Then came the comments about my health. At dinner one night, I forgot to bring a side dish from the kitchen. Charlotte smiled too sweetly and said, "See? That's what I'm talking about. Your memory isn't what it used to be. You should let us handle more for you." Another time, I had a nightmare and woke up shouting. Richard leaned against the doorway the next morning and said, "You know, that's exactly what the VA calls episodes. Maybe you should get checked again." He didn't say it with concern. He said it like he was storing ammunition. I told myself I was imagining it, that grief was making me oversensitive. I'd lost my husband in a training accident, and after years of deployments, my body was wired for danger even in my sleep. Maybe I wanted to believe my sister was better than she was. But every little moment was a piece of the puzzle they were building against me. Charlotte started helping with my mail. She'd offer to sort through it when I was out on walks. When I came back, the pile always looked thinner. Once, I found a letter from the bank opened on the counter. She swore it was an accident. Another time, she offered to hold on to my Army medical files so I wouldn't lose them. I kept those locked up after that. The turning point was the day she walked in with her laptop and sat beside me on the couch. "Evelyn, I was looking into some legal options. You know, just in case something happens to you. Guardianship is such a safe way to make sure family can step in when needed." She smiled like she was suggesting we try a new recipe. I laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic, but her eyes didn't leave my face. She was gauging my reaction, testing how far she could push. Richard played his part too. He'd pour himself a drink and mutter just loud enough for me to hear, "She can't keep this up forever. One of these days, someone's going to have to take over." I wanted to throw the glass at his head. Instead, I pretended not to hear. That's what they counted on me staying quiet, too polite, too tired to fight. Even the neighbors got dragged into their act. At a block barbecue, I overheard Charlotte telling Mrs. Green across the street, "Evelyn's been through so much. She's strong, but I worry about her. Sometimes she forgets things, and Richard and I do our best to keep her on track." Mrs. Green gave me that pitying look people give when they think you're slipping. I laughed it off, made a joke, but deep down I felt humiliated. They weren't just plotting behind my back. They were building a case in the court of public opinion. I thought about all this in that motel room. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. How long had they been setting me up? Since the day I moved in? Maybe even before? My sister, my own blood, was willing to paint me as incompetent just to get her hands on my pension and my house. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft of my life. I paced the room, going over every choice I'd made. Selling my condo after my husband's death. Moving in with Charlotte because I didn't want to sit alone in empty rooms. Handing her the trust she didn't deserve because I thought family meant safety. Every decision now looked like a mistake carved in stone. But regret wasn't going to help me now. I still had what mattered. My discharge papers, my ID, the truth of who I was. I wasn't broken, and I wasn't crazy. I had scars, sure, but I'd earned every one of them and learned how to live with them. If they thought they could twist that into weakness, they had no idea who they were up against. I sat back down, forced myself to breathe evenly, and pulled out my notebook. The Army had drilled one thing into me: make a plan. You don't just sit and hope. You assess, you adapt, you act. So that's what I started doing. Who could I trust? Who could back me up? Who knew me well enough to vouch for me when Charlotte tried to drag me into court as her helpless little sister? Names came to mind. Miles Johnson, my old captain who now worked at Veterans Affairs, Helen Brooks, the Army medic who'd patched me up more times than I could count and now ran a clinic downtown. People who knew me, who knew my record, who knew I wasn't the unstable liability Charlotte was painting me as. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I wasn't just running, I was preparing. If Charlotte wanted a battle, she was going to get one. Only this time, it wouldn't be on her terms. The hum of the motel AC filled the silence, but my head was anything but quiet. I could see their smug faces, Charlotte's fake concern, Richard's smirk. They thought they had me cornered. They thought family drama gave them the upper hand. What they didn't count on was that I'd been trained for battles a lot worse than this. The sun was just starting to rise when I sat on the edge of the motel bed, my duffel bag still half open on the floor. My eyes burned from staying awake all night, but my nerves were sharper than ever. I couldn't shake the thought that Charlotte and Richard weren't just talking about guardianship in the abstract, they already had something ready. The way she said, "Everything is ready," kept echoing in my head. That meant paperwork, maybe even fake records, and I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I powered up the prepaid phone I'd brought with me. It wasn't tied to my name, which made it the safest option. I logged into my old email account, one I rarely used. My fingers hesitated over the keys, but curiosity shoved me forward. Charlotte had borrowed my laptop plenty of times to check something quickly. I had brushed it off, but I started thinking, what if she'd gone through my files, maybe even sent things to herself? I searched my inbox, scrolling through weeks of unopened junk until a subject line jumped out: guardianship documentation. The sender wasn't Charlotte's email address, but a local attorney's office. My stomach clenched. I clicked it open, and there it was. Scanned copies of forms with my name typed neatly in the spaces. But the medical section made my blood boil. It claimed I had recurring blackouts, severe PTSD, and impaired decision-making. None of it was true. Attached was a letterhead from a clinic I vaguely recognized. A Dr. Allen had supposedly evaluated me and recommended guardianship for my safety. The problem? I'd never met a Dr. Allen in my life. The last physician who saw me was Army medical staff before discharge, and my records had been clear. This was a fabrication. I copied the documents onto a flash drive I'd packed, then stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Charlotte hadn't just planned to make me look incompetent, she'd built the evidence. She must have bribed or manipulated someone to create these notes. The reality of it sat heavy on my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was calculated fraud. I closed the laptop and paced the room. Part of me wanted to storm back into that house, wave the papers in her face, and scream. But the soldier in me knew better. Charging blindly only got you shot. You gather intel, you confirm sources, you build your case. I dialed the clinic number on the letterhead. It rang twice before a woman answered. "Good morning, Westfield Community Health." I asked, "Can I speak with Dr. Allen?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Dr. Allen isn't in today. May I take a message?" Something in her tone felt rehearsed. I pressed, "Can you confirm if he's seen a patient named Evelyn Parker?" Another pause. "I'm not authorized to disclose patient information." Her quick, clipped answer told me more than she realized. She hadn't even asked for my date of birth. They were covering tracks. I thanked her and hung up. My pulse was racing now, not from fear but from anger. Charlotte had pulled a fake doctor into this, or maybe a real doctor willing to sign lies. Either way, it was a crime. And if she thought I was too naive to notice, she'd underestimated me. I sat back down and forced myself to breathe. Step 1. Secure evidence. I saved the email, the attachments, and took screenshots. Step 2. Identify allies who could validate my real medical history. Step 3. Prepare to dismantle her plan in front of a judge, because that's where this was headed. I thought back to little things Charlotte had said. "You don't need to keep all those records. I'll handle them." Or Richard's smug remark, "Courts usually believe family over some veteran who can't keep her head straight." At the time, I'd brushed them off. Now they were puzzle pieces snapping into place. They weren't improvising, they'd been rehearsing. I opened my duffel again and pulled out the manila folder with my Army medical discharge papers. The signatures were official, the dates current, the language clear. No cognitive impairment, capable of independent living. That was the truth. The fake records claimed the opposite. I had both sides of the story in my hands. The question was, which one would a court believe? I rubbed my temples, exhaustion threatening to drag me down, but I couldn't stop. I needed more. If they had emailed a lawyer, that meant there were drafts, maybe meetings, maybe even billing records. Lawyers left paper trails. Charlotte wasn't clever enough to erase all of that. The motel walls felt like they were closing in, so I grabbed my keys and headed to the car. I drove to a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, bought the cheapest cup they had, and set up at a corner table. Using the prepaid phone, I searched the attorney's office listed on the email. Sure enough, their website bragged about supporting families through guardianship transitions. They even had a smiling stock photo of a daughter helping her elderly mother. The irony almost made me laugh. I wasn't elderly, and I damn sure didn't need help. I jotted down the attorney's name, Robert Keller. If Charlotte had been in contact with him, his office would have records. Maybe not accessible to me directly, but I knew people who could guide me. Miles at Veterans Affairs would know the legal angles. Helen, my medic friend, could back up my true health status. Piece by piece, I was building a counterattack. As I sipped the bitter coffee, I scrolled further through my email and found another message. This one was from Richard's account, forwarded to Charlotte. It contained a draft statement. Evelyn has displayed erratic behavior, memory lapses, and financial irresponsibility. Guardianship will ensure her safety. My jaw clenched. Financial irresponsibility? I'd spent 20 years balancing logistics for soldiers in combat zones. Meanwhile, Richard couldn't keep track of his own bar tabs. I saved that too. Every lie they put in writing was one more nail in their coffin. I leaned back, staring out the window at people rushing to work, grabbing lattes, checking their phones. To them, I was just another tired woman with too much caffeine in her veins. They had no idea I was sitting on proof that my own sister was trying to erase me from my life. My chest tightened, but not with fear anymore. With resolve. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them strip me of the independence I fought for, the benefits my husband died for, the dignity I earned every single day in uniform. I folded the papers back into my duffel, zipped it shut, and stood up. The day had barely begun, but my battle lines were already drawn. Charlotte thought she could rewrite my story with a few fake records. She had no idea the fight she'd just started. I stuffed the flash drive deep into my duffel and tightened my jacket before stepping out into the cold morning air. The evidence was real, but evidence alone didn't fight battles people did. And I knew exactly who to call. Captain Miles Johnson, my old logistics officer. We hadn't spoken in months, but if there was anyone who understood strategy, It was him. I drove to a quiet parking lot outside a hardware store, where no one would notice me making calls. The prepaid phone felt small in my hand, but the moment I heard his gravelly voice on the other end, the weight on my chest lightened. Parker? Damn, it's been a while. You sound like hell. Good to hear you too, Miles. Listen, I need your brain, and I need you to keep this quiet. There was a pause. You're not calling about poker night. What's going on? My sister and her husband are trying to get me declared incompetent. They've got fake medical records, a lawyer in their pocket, the whole 9 yards. I heard him whistle low. Jesus, you serious? I've got the papers right here. Emails, attachments, forged doctor's notes. It's a setup. Another pause. His tone shifted, crisp like when we used to plan supply lines under fire. All right. First thing, you're safe, right? I'm at a motel. They don't know where. Good, don't go back to that house. You'll need allies, and you'll need to hit this from 2 angles, legal and psychological. They want to make you look unstable? Fine. We'll prove the opposite. And we'll do it in a way that makes them look like the schemers they are. That was Miles. He didn't waste time with pity. He moved straight to action. I'll dig into that attorney, Keller. Military buddies still owe me favors, some of them in law enforcement. If Keller's dirty, we'll know. Meanwhile, you need a medical witness. Someone credible who can shut down that fake doctor's nonsense. Helen Brooks, I said immediately. She was the Army medic who cleared me at discharge. She knows my record inside and out. Perfect. Call her, set up an evaluation, get it in writing. I could almost hear him scribbling notes like he used to during mission briefings. And Evelyn? Don't let your emotions take the wheel. These people want you rattled. If you keep your head, you'll win. I smiled despite myself. Since when have I ever lost my head? Afghanistan, 2008, he shot back without missing a beat. IED went off and you screamed louder than the damn truck. I laughed, the tension cracking for the first time in days. Fine, fair point. All right, keep me posted. I'll start digging. When I hung up, I sat there a moment, staring at the steering wheel. Relief mixed with determination. I wasn't alone anymore. I pulled up Helen's number from memory and dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice steady and familiar. Evelyn Parker, haven't heard from you since you ditched me at the base cookout. I let out a breath that was half laugh. I owe you a burger for life. But Helen, I need more than a cookout favor right now. Her tone shifted. What's going on? I explained everything, Charlotte's late-night call, the fake records, the lawyer. Helen didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Evelyn, this is serious. If those papers get into a court, it could snowball fast. I know. That's why I need you. Can you run a full evaluation? Put it on record that I'm sound, no impairment, nothing that justifies guardianship? You're asking me to put my license on the line. I swallowed hard. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't absolutely certain. Helen, you know me. I'm not losing my independence over lies. She sighed. All right, I'll do it. But it has to be by the book tests, documentation, the works. If this goes to trial, the judge will want clean evidence. That's all I'm asking. I can see you tomorrow morning. My clinic opens at 9. Don't be late. I thanked her. And when I hung up, I felt like I'd just secured air support in a ground fight. Back at the motel, I spread everything out on the desk. The fake documents, my real discharge papers, and a notepad where I scribbled steps like a mission checklist. Secure legal ally. Miles working on it. Secure medical ally. Helen scheduled. Gather more dirt on Charlotte and Richard. Stay hidden until stronger. The more I stared at it, the more it felt like prepping an operation. My operation. I couldn't just sit idle. Charlotte would move fast. She always did when she thought she had the upper hand. So I pulled out the flash drive and decided to scan for more. I dug into my email again, this time filtering by Richard's name. That's when I found another gem, an email chain between Richard and Keller. Richard had written, "Once guardianship is approved, we'll finally have access to her military pension. That'll cover the mortgage." There it was, in black and white, the motive. Not concern for my health, not family responsibility, money. My pension, earned with sweat and blood, was their golden ticket. I sat back in the chair, rage simmering hot. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft waiting to happen. My mind shifted gears. If money was their motive, then exposure was my weapon. They wanted control of my pension? I'd make damn sure the world knew they tried to steal it. Public shame could break them just as much as legal defeat. I thought about the contacts I had, journalists I'd met when speaking at military events, veterans advocacy groups, people who actually respected service. If Charlotte and Richard thought they could spin a story, I'd drown them in truth. The motel door rattled suddenly, jerking me out of my thoughts. My heart jumped. I moved silently to the side, grabbing the small pistol I kept in my duffel. The rattling stopped, followed by footsteps moving down the hall. Maybe just another guest, but my instincts stayed sharp. I wasn't about to be caught off guard. When the silence returned, I eased back into the chair. Every nerve in me buzzed. This fight wasn't going to be clean. Charlotte wasn't stupid. She'd suspect I had run with evidence. I needed to stay 2 steps ahead. I packed everything neatly, checked the window locks, and slid the pistol under the pillow. The night stretched ahead, but my plan was clearer than ever. I wasn't a victim hiding in a motel. I was a soldier regrouping, pulling my team together, setting the battlefield. Charlotte thought she had allies in her pocket. So did I. And mine were a hell of a lot more loyal. The next morning, I slid behind the wheel of my old Chevy, the duffel bag on the passenger seat. My meeting with Helen was set. Miles was digging into Keller. But one thing still gnawed at me. I needed undeniable proof of Charlotte's intent. Not just emails or suspicious paperwork, something direct. Something that could bury her in her own words. I drove past her house slowly, keeping my ball cap pulled low. From the outside, it looked picture-perfect white shutters, trimmed hedges, the kind of place that screams, respectable. But I knew better. Behind those shutters, Charlotte was sharpening knives. Instead of parking close, I left my truck in a grocery store lot 2 blocks over and walked back, blending in with the early dog walkers. My boots crunched on the pavement as I stopped under a tree across the street. From here, I could see into the kitchen if the blinds were open. And they were. Richard was at the table in his undershirt, scrolling on his phone. Charlotte stood near the sink, pacing with hers pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear, but her body language was loud, pointing, frowning, gesturing with frustration. That wasn't enough. I needed sound. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small recorder Miles had mailed me years back. It was old school, meant for interviews, but it could pick up a whisper through a wall. The trick was getting close enough. I waited until Richard left for work. His blue Ford backed out around 8:15 like clockwork. Charlotte stayed behind, phone glued to her hand. When she disappeared into the living room, I moved. I crossed the street, crouched low by the side of the house, and slid the recorder under the edge of an open basement window. My pulse hammered, but my training steadied me. In and out, quick. I returned to my spot under the tree, pretending to fiddle with my phone. A few minutes later, I heard her voice crackle faintly through the recorder's wireless earpiece. He's confident Keller can push it through. The doctor's letter is already filed. All we need is for the judge to sign off. I clenched my jaw. That was confirmation. She paused, then added, "No, she doesn't know a thing. Evelyn still thinks her army buddies matter. Let her keep playing soldier. By the time she figures it out, the papers will be stamped." My stomach dropped, then hardened. She was mocking me, mocking the very thing that gave me strength. Another voice answered faintly on speakerphone, probably Richard. What if she resists? What if she hires a lawyer? Charlotte snapped. Lawyers cost money. She doesn't have any. Once we're her guardians, her pension covers everything. Stop worrying. Every word was like a bullet casing hitting the ground, loud, undeniable, damning. I let the recorder run another 10 minutes, then slipped back to the house once she moved upstairs. With one swift motion, I retrieved the device and tucked it into my jacket. My hands trembled as I walked away, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from rage. Back in the truck, I played the recording again. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but Charlotte's voice was clear enough. Miles could enhance it, maybe even get a forensic audio specialist. This was gold. I called him immediately. Got her, I said, voice low but fierce. What do you mean, got her? I planted a recorder. She admitted everything, doctor's letter, Keller's push, using my pension. Mocked my service, too. Miles barked a short laugh. That woman just handed you the case on a silver platter. Send me the file. I'll have someone clean up the audio. Keep copies in 3 different places, Evelyn. Don't trust one source. I've already got it backed up, I said. Flash drive, cloud, and this recorder stays on me. That's the soldier I remember. Now listen, you need to be careful. If she finds out you've got her words, she'll get desperate. I knew he was right. Desperate people made mistakes, but they also lashed out. I spent the afternoon back at the motel, transferring the files and labeling them like evidence bags. Timestamps, descriptions, everything organized. The Army drilled documentation into us for years. Now it was second nature. Around 6 p.m., hunger pulled me out. I walked to a diner across the street, ordered a burger and black coffee, and sat near the window with my notebook. Families filled the booths, kids laughing, plates clattering. I wondered how many of them could imagine what I was fighting. Betrayal didn't come from strangers, it came from the people you thought had your back. Halfway through my meal, a familiar car rolled past the window. Charlotte's SUV. My shoulders stiffened. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near here. Did she know where I was staying? Or was it coincidence? I paid quickly, slipped out the back door, and circled the block. The SUV parked across from the motel. My chest tightened as I crouched between 2 cars, watching. Charlotte sat behind the wheel, scrolling on her phone. She wasn't looking at the motel yet. After 10 minutes, she drove off. My hands unclenched slowly. Maybe she was running errands. Or maybe she was hunting. Back in my room, I double-checked the locks and pulled the curtains tight. If she was snooping, I couldn't risk leading her to the evidence. I stuffed the flash drive into a plastic bag, taped it under the sink, and kept the recorder in my pocket. Even if the room got tossed, something would survive. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed her words over and over. Let her keep playing soldier. The sneer in her tone stoked something inside me. I hadn't felt since combat a mix of fury and focus. She thought I was weak, past my prime, easy to corner. She had no idea she'd just woken up the part of me that doesn't lose. Around 3 a.m., I sat at the desk, scribbling again. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about offense. She wanted to strip me of my dignity, my independence, my pension. I was going to strip her of her lies, her reputation, and her power. The recorder sat on the table, small and ordinary. But to me, it was a weapon. And now, the war wasn't just defensive. It was mine to take to her. The clinic's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the waiting room, my knee bouncing with restless energy. I had the recorder in my jacket pocket, the flash drive in my duffel, and a folder of Army medical papers tucked under my arm. This wasn't just another appointment, it was ammunition. Helen stepped out from the back, her white coat half-buttoned, her hair pulled into the same no-nonsense bun I remembered from deployment. "Parker," she said with a small grin, "you look like you're about to fail a PT test just from nerves." I exhaled through my nose. I've faced mortar fire with steadier hands than this. She led me into her office, where the blinds were drawn and a framed diploma hung crooked on the wall. I sat down across from her desk, and she immediately cut to the chase. "Tell me what you've got." I laid the folder out, then slid over the fake documents I'd printed. She scanned them quickly, her brow tightening. "This is trash. For one, the date of evaluation is 3 weeks after you were officially cleared at Fort Carson. Second, Dr. Allen isn't even licensed in this state. And look here, the signature block? It's a scanned copy pasted on multiple forms. Amateur hour. All." Her sharp tone was oddly comforting. "So you can prove it's fake?" I asked. "Better," she said. "I can prove you're fit. We'll do a full cognitive evaluation, motor skills test, memory recall, the works. I'll file it as an independent report. Any judge who looks at both sets of records will see which one is real." She handed me a clipboard. "Answer these questions, then we'll get started." The test took an hour. Simple math problems, recall exercises, reaction timing. At one point, she asked me to draw a clock showing 11:10. I chuckled. "Helen, I planned convoy routes across 3 provinces. I think I can handle a clock." "Humor me," she said. When it was done, she leaned back, tapping her pen. "You're sharper than half the residents on my street. No impairment, no instability. If anything, you're more disciplined than most civilians." Relief washed over me like cold water after a long run. So this will hold up in court? Absolutely, she said, signing the papers. And I'll testify if it comes to that. I don't take kindly to people faking medical records, especially not against someone who served. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my breath until my chest ached. I reached across the desk and gripped her hand. Thank you. She squeezed back. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when they're staring at the floor in front of a judge. Note: I left the clinic with 2 sets of documents, the fake ones from Charlotte and the certified evaluation from Helen. Side by side, they told a story of fraud, manipulation, and outright lies. My enemies had underestimated how quickly I'd fight back. Back at the motel, I scanned Helen's report and sent it to Miles with a secure message. He replied within minutes. Perfect. This nails their credibility. Keep originals locked up. I'm second. I hid the signed copies in the lining of my duffel bag, the kind of trick we used in the field for classified maps. If anyone rifled through my belongings, they wouldn't know where to look. That night, I sat at the tiny motel desk and replayed Charlotte's voice from the recorder. Let her keep playing soldier. Her arrogance echoed in my ears, but now I had something solid to throw back. The next morning, I called Keller's office directly. A woman answered, syrupy polite. Good morning, Keller and Associates. Yes, this is Evelyn Parker. I'd like to confirm whether your office is representing Charlotte and Richard Miller regarding a guardianship petition. There was a pause long enough to make my skin prickle. I'm not sure I can disclose that information, ma'am. So you can't confirm or deny? Correct. Interesting, I said evenly. Because if you are, you should know I have documented proof of falsified medical records being used in your case. And I will bring it before the state bar, if necessary. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Finally, she said, "One moment, please," and put me on hold. I hung up before Keller himself could get on the line. Let him stew. Let him wonder what I had. If Charlotte thought she was the only one playing offense, she was wrong. Later that afternoon, Miles called. Got some news for you. Keller's firm has had complaints before shady guardianship cases, elderly clients who just happen to lose control of their assets. Nothing proven, but smoke this thick usually means fire. So Charlotte picked him on purpose. Or he picked her, Miles said. Either way, you've got leverage now. Helen's report, your discharge papers, the audio you're building a wall they can't climb. I looked around the motel room, plain walls, stale air, and realized I didn't feel trapped anymore. I felt like a commander in a forward operating base. Rough, temporary, but ready for the mission. That evening, I drove to a storage unit facility and rented a small unit under a false name. I stashed duplicates of every document there, hidden under an old duffel stuffed with blankets. If Charlotte or Richard ever tried to break into my motel room, they'd come up empty. When I locked the unit, I stood in the fading sunlight, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was no longer on the run. I was positioning. On the way back, I stopped at a gas station and caught my reflection in the glass door. My hair was pulled back tight, my jacket zipped high, eyes sharp. I looked less like someone hiding and more like what I really was, a soldier gearing up for battle. By the time I settled in for the night, my plan had shifted again. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was striking first. And Charlotte? She had no idea the first blow had already landed. The knock on my motel door came just after 9 at night, 3 hard raps that made my pulse spike. I slipped my pistol behind the lamp on the nightstand and opened the door just enough to see a uniform. A police officer stood there, hand resting casually on his belt. Evening, ma'am. You Evelyn Parker? I kept my voice level. Depends who's asking. He showed me his badge. Officer Reynolds, Westfield PD, we received a welfare call from your family. They're claiming you're missing, possibly unstable. Mind if we talk? There, it was the first strike from Charlotte's playbook. I opened the door wide enough for him to step in, then crossed my arms. I'm not missing, and I'm not unstable. Want proof? He looked a little taken aback at my bluntness. I just need to confirm you're safe, that's all. I handed him a copy of Helen's medical report, signed just that morning. His eyes flicked over it. Independent evaluation, no impairment. Well, this doesn't exactly scream unstable. No, it doesn't, I said sharply. What it screams is that my sister is filing false reports to build a case for guardianship. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm just here to make sure you're okay. I'm better than okay. I'm competent, I'm lucid, and I have evidence of fraud. I reached into my duffel and pulled out the flash drive. Audio recordings of my sister admitting she's pushing this through with a lawyer and fake medical papers. You want to log that into your system? His brows shot up. That's more than I usually deal with on these calls. Then note this, I said firmly. If Charlotte or Richard Miller file another false report about my mental state, it's harassment, and I'll pursue charges. He cleared his throat, clearly caught between protocol and common sense. All right, Miss Parker. I'll make sure this is documented. You're free to go about your business. As soon as he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, my body buzzing with adrenaline. Charlotte had escalated, but instead of cornering me, she'd just given me a chance to plant my side of the story in an official police file. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront her in person, not in private, where she could twist things. Public, where lies don't hold as easily. I drove to her house, parked 2 doors down, and walked up the sidewalk with my shoulders squared. She opened the door with that same smug expression she always wore when she thought she was winning. Well, well, she said. Look who finally decided to crawl back. I didn't flinch. Cut the act, Charlotte. I know about Keller. I know about the fake doctor. And I have the audio. For the first time, her face faltered. Just for a second. Then she smirked. You're paranoid. You've always been paranoid. That's why everyone believes you're unstable. Funny, I said. Because the police believed Helen's report, and they logged your false welfare call as harassment. Her eyes narrowed. You think that'll stop me? No, I said evenly. But it proves I'm not the crazy one here. Richard appeared behind her, his tie half loosened, like he'd just gotten home. Evelyn, you need help. We're trying to do what's best for you. I barked a laugh that made them both jump. Best for me? You mean best for your mortgage, Richard. I read your email to Keller. Don't bother denying it. His face drained of color. Charlotte snapped. You had no right to go through my private emails. You had no right to forge medical records. I shot back. My voice carried into the street, and a neighbor watering his lawn looked over curiously. Good. Let them all hear. Charlotte hissed. Keep your voice down. No, I said louder. You tried to strip me of my rights, my pension, and my dignity, and you failed. The neighbor's wife stepped onto their porch, and soon another couple paused on their evening walk. An audience was forming. Richard tugged at Charlotte's arm, whispering something, but she yanked away. You don't get to play hero, Evelyn. You've always been reckless, always dragging others into your mess. I took a step closer, meeting her glare head-on. Reckless? I led convoys through Kandahar. I managed logistics for 300 soldiers under fire. You think standing up to you is reckless? This is nothing. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For once, she had no script. Richard muttered, Let's just go inside. But Charlotte's pride wouldn't let her back down. You can scream all you want. Nobody's going to believe you. That's when I pulled the small recorder from my pocket and pressed play. Her own voice spilled into the evening air. Let her keep playing soldier. By the time she figures it out, the papers will be stamped. The neighbors froze. One of them whispered, Did she just say papers? Charlotte lunged for the recorder, but I stepped back. Go ahead. Make a scene. Everyone just heard the truth. She froze, realization dawning that her little empire of control had just cracked in front of witnesses. Richard turned away, muttering curses under his breath. I slipped the recorder back into my jacket and straightened up. I'm not your victim, Charlotte. Not now, not ever. The silence stretched heavy between us, broken only by the sound of sprinklers down the block. Charlotte's lips pressed into a thin line, her face pale as stone. I turned and walked back down the driveway, my steps steady, my chest tight with both fury and triumph. Behind me, whispers rippled among the neighbors. They'd heard enough to know who the villain was. When I reached my truck, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time since this nightmare started, the power balance had shifted, and Charlotte knew it. I woke up the next morning to the buzzing of my prepaid phone on the nightstand. The number was unfamiliar, but the voicemail it left made my blood run hot. It was Charlotte's voice, clipped and dramatic. She's losing it. Look at her eyes. Look how erratic she island. I'm scared for my safety. We need to get her evaluated. And for more. She was talking to someone, maybe Keller, maybe even the police. I didn't have to guess what she was setting up. She was trying to flip the narrative after last night's confrontation in front of the neighbors. An hour later, Miles sent me a text. Check this out. It's circulating online. I clicked the link he attached, and sure enough, there it was, a shaky phone video that looked like it had been recorded from a living room window. It showed me walking away from Charlotte's house after the confrontation, but the audio was edited. Instead of Charlotte's words from the recorder, they'd spliced in phrases to make it sound like I was ranting about being unstable and unfit. My fists clenched around the phone. The video was sloppy, but to someone who didn't know better, it looked like a meltdown. They'd cut out all the context, leaving me looking like the villain. I dialed Miles immediately. They're trying to frame me. They chopped up that recording and flipped it. Yeah, I saw. Don't panic. I've already got a buddy in cyber forensics working on the raw files. The edits are obvious once you slow it down. We'll expose it. But in the meantime, people will see this garbage and believe it. Evelyn, he said firmly. They just overplayed their hand. You've got clean audio, Helen's report, and the police record from last night. Stack that against a choppy backyard video, and they'll look like amateurs. You just need to get ahead of it. He was right. Sitting in silence while Charlotte smeared me wasn't an option. I had to counterpunch. I grabbed my duffel and drove straight to Helen's clinic. She met me in her office, expression already tense. I saw the video, she said. It's trash, but trash spreads fast. Then let's bury it with the truth. I pulled out the recorder and played Charlotte's real words. We can timestamp this with your evaluation. Together, it destroys their fake story. Helen nodded slowly. If you want, I can hold a press briefing. Medical professionals don't usually get involved, but in a case like this, it's elder abuse, plain and simple. I'll stand behind you. Hearing her say it, elder abuse, lit a fire in me. That's exactly what it was, dressed up in legal paperwork and crocodile tears. We spent the next 2 hours drafting a statement. Helen would publicly confirm her evaluation of me as sound, then denounce the misuse of falsified records. I'd release the clean audio of Charlotte plotting. It wouldn't just neutralize their attack, it would flip the humiliation back on them. That night, Miles called again. I've got Keller's assistant talking. Off the record, she said Charlotte demanded they leak something to counter you. They panicked after you embarrassed her in front of the neighbors. So this video was their desperate move? Exactly. And it's going to blow up in their faces. My guy analyzed it. It's spliced in at least 7 places. A first-year tech student could spot the edits. The next morning, Helen and I met at her clinic for the press statement. Local reporters gathered, cameras clicking as she adjusted her glasses and began. As a licensed physician, I evaluated Major Evelyn Parker yesterday. She shows no signs of impairment, instability, or cognitive decline. Claims to the contrary are baseless and appear to stem from falsified records. Furthermore, I have reviewed authentic audio evidence that contradicts the video currently circulating online. That video is clearly manipulated. I stepped up after her, my uniform jacket zipped tight even though I hadn't worn it in years. For 20 years, I served this country with honor. Now my own sister is trying to strip me of my freedom with lies. She underestimated me. She underestimated the truth. And today, we prove it. The reporters ate it up. They asked for copies of the audio, and I gave them just enough without handing over every card. Within hours, local stations were running the story. Veteran claims sister falsified records for guardianship bid. The video Charlotte leaked was already being debunked on air, frame by frame. I knew she'd be watching from that smug little kitchen of hers, and I hoped every second burned. But I didn't stop there. I contacted a veterans advocacy group I'd spoken with years earlier. Their director, a wiry Marine named Lopez, promised to put out a statement of support. Nobody pulls this crap on one of ours, he said. We'll rally behind you. By the end of the day, the tide had shifted. The fake video was now being called a botched smear campaign. Reporters camped outside Charlotte's driveway, peppering her with questions when she tried to leave. Richard looked like a deer in headlights on the news clip, muttering, "No comment," as the cameras followed. Charlotte, on the other hand, kept insisting, She's dangerous, she's unstable, but her words rang hollow now. Meanwhile, I sat in my motel room, feet up on the bed, watching it unfold on TV. The anger that had been eating me alive was finally giving way to something else: satisfaction. Miles called again that evening, his tone almost amused. "They're collapsing, Evelyn. Keller's office is distancing itself, saying they had no knowledge of falsified records. He won't risk his license for them." "Good," I said, sipping lukewarm diner coffee. "Let him crawl back under his rock. Charlotte's boxed in now. The only thing she can try is doubling down in court, and with everything you've gathered, she's going to get shredded." I leaned back, letting that sink in. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. But deep down, I knew Charlotte wasn't done. She'd push harder, claw deeper, anything to save face. The more she lost, the more dangerous she'd get. Still, I had what mattered: proof, allies, and a voice louder than her lies. And no matter how she twisted or clawed, she'd never take that from me again. The courthouse smelled of old paper and disinfectant, a place where lives got dissected and judged in neat little files. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Denise Porter I'd hired through a veteran's referral. She had eyes like steel and the kind of calm that makes opponents nervous. Across the aisle, Charlotte and Richard sat stiffly beside Keller, who looked less like a confident attorney and more like a man trying not to sweat through his suit. The judge entered, and we all stood. She was middle-aged, firm-voiced, and not someone you could charm with crocodile tears. Perfect. Keller opened the case with a practiced voice. "Your Honor, this is a matter of concern for my clients, Miss. Parker has exhibited erratic behavior, paranoia, and an inability to manage her own finances. My clients only seek guardianship to ensure her well-being." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. Erratic behavior? The only erratic ones were sitting across the aisle. Denise stood smoothly. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that this petition is not about care but about control. We will show falsified medical records, fabricated evidence, and financial motives. This is elder abuse, not guardianship." The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued already. "Proceed." Keller called Charlotte to the stand first. She walked up with her pearls and pastel blazer, trying to look like the picture of concerned family. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she spoke. "My sister has changed so much since leaving the army. She forgets things, lashes out, and puts herself in danger. We only want to protect her." Denise leaned forward. "Miss Miller, isn't it true that you contacted Dr. Allen to produce a medical letter about your sister?" Charlotte blinked. "Yes, but—" "And isn't it true that Dr. Allen never actually examined her?" Charlotte's smile faltered. I don't know the details. The doctor provided the letter." "Provided to whom?" Charlotte swallowed. "To me." Denise pounced. "So, you solicited medical documentation about your sister without her consent, from a doctor she never met. And you presented this as evidence of incapacity. Is that correct?" The room was silent, except for Charlotte's shaky breath. "I was only trying to help." "Help yourself to her pension, perhaps?" Denise asked coolly, sliding a copy of Richard's email into evidence. "Your husband wrote to Keller that guardianship would cover the mortgage. Care to explain how her well-being is tied to your house payment?" Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding the judge's gaze. Keller tried to object, but the judge waved him down. "Overruled. Answer the question." Charlotte stammered. "That was just—" Richard speaking carelessly. Denise didn't let up. Carelessly or truthfully? The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. When it was my turn to take the stand, I walked up, steady uniform jacket zipped. I looked the judge in the eye and spoke clearly. "I served this country for 20 years. I managed supplies, logistics, and personnel under fire. If I can coordinate hundreds of soldiers in a combat zone, I think I can manage my own checkbook." A few people in the gallery chuckled softly. Denise handed me Helen's medical report. "Major Parker, can you tell the court what this is?" "This is the evaluation Dr. Brooks conducted last week. She tested my cognition, memory, and decision-making. I passed every category, no impairment." "And what do you have here?" Denise held up the recorder. "This is audio of my sister admitting she pushed for guardianship with falsified records, mocking my service and discussing how my pension would cover her expenses." We played the clip. Charlotte's voice filled the courtroom. Let her keep playing soldier. By the time she figures it out, the papers will be stamped. The gallery murmured. The judge raised her hand for silence, her expression unreadable but stern. Keller stood quickly. Your Honor, that recording could be taken out of context. Denise shot back. Out of context? We also have a cyber forensics report confirming this audio is authentic and untouched, unlike the video they leaked online. The judge's eyes narrowed at Keller. Video? Denise slid forward another exhibit. Yes, Your Honor. Opposing parties attempted to circulate a doctored video portraying my client as unstable. Independent analysis confirmed it was spliced. That's evidence tampering. 1. Keller sputtered, but the judge cut him off. Sit down, Mr. Keller. I watched Charlotte's face pale as Denise stacked the evidence higher. Emails, financial records showing their debt, screenshots of Charlotte fabricated claims. Piece by piece, their credibility crumbled. By the time Helen testified, calmly confirming her medical report, Charlotte's composure was cracking. She whispered furiously to Richard, who sat red-faced, staring at the floor. Finally, the judge leaned forward, hands clasped. I've heard enough. Guardianship is denied. Furthermore, this court will be referring the matter of falsified records and possible fraud to the district attorney's office. I suggest you seek counsel. Charlotte's mouth opened like she might argue, but the bailiff's glare shut her down. As the gavel struck, relief coursed through me so strong I almost sagged. It wasn't just victory, it was vindication. I stepped down from the stand, meeting Charlotte's eyes briefly. Her expression was pure venom, but behind it was fear. She knew she'd lost the war she started. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones shoved in my face, questions fired from every angle. Major Parker, what's next for you? How do you feel about your sister's actions? Do you think criminal charges are justified? I raised my chin, speaking loud enough for every camera. What my sister did wasn't just betrayal, it was abuse. Abuse of trust, abuse of the system, abuse of me as a veteran and as a person. I fought battles overseas to protect freedom. Today, I fought one here to protect my own. And I won't stop making sure others don't go through the same thing. Flashes erupted, reporters shouted follow-ups, but I pushed through, shoulders squared. This wasn't about sound bites, it was about reclaiming my life. As I reached my truck, Miles was waiting by the curb. He gave me a slow nod. You didn't just win, Evelyn. You obliterated them. I exhaled, tension finally slipping from my shoulders. Good, because they had it coming. By the time I got home from the courthouse, the storm had already hit. Local news stations ran clips of the hearing, playing Charlotte's own voice on a loop. Let her keep playing soldier. By the time she figures it out, the papers will be stamped. The audio was damning, and the headlines were merciless. Veteran exposes sister's guardianship fraud. Family betrayal. Sibling plot to steal military pension. Charlotte and Richard's picture was plastered across every news site in town. The comment section was a bloodbath, neighbors, co-workers, and strangers calling them liars, predators, and worse. For two people obsessed with appearances, it was the one punishment they couldn't outrun. That evening, I sat in my apartment watching the coverage with a glass of bourbon. Miles called, his voice almost cheerful. Richard just got put on leave from his job. HR couldn't ignore the fraud allegations. And Charlotte? Her PTA group just voted her out as president. Apparently, nobody wants a liar running school fundraisers. I smirked. Funny how quickly people change their tune once the truth comes out. It's only the start, Miles said. The DA's office confirmed they're reviewing the evidence for criminal charges. If Keller thinks he's escaping clean, he's dumber than he looks. I leaned back, letting the words settle. I didn't need to chase them anymore. Their empire was already collapsing from the inside. The next morning, I went to a coffee shop downtown. A couple of veterans I vaguely knew from community events were sitting at a corner table. One of them spotted me and raised a hand. Major Parker, hell of a fight you put up. I smiled politely. Word traveled fast in military circles, and this story had all the ingredients: betrayal, fraud, and a veteran standing her ground. As I ordered, the barista whispered, "Good for you, ma'am. My grandma went through something similar. Wish she'd fought back like you did." It hit me then this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a mirror for a lot of people who'd been silenced by family pressure, by manipulation, by fear. Later that day, Charlotte tried to spin the narrative herself. She showed up on a local morning show, face pale but still painted with too much makeup. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "We love Evelyn. We only wanted to make sure she was cared for." The media twisted everything. The host leaned forward. "But Miss Miller, the audio we played was authenticated. That's your voice." Charlotte blinked rapidly, then stammered. "Out of context. Those were private words taken out of context." End quote. The host didn't even hide her skepticism. By the time the segment ended, Charlotte looked more guilty than sympathetic. The audience had already made up their minds. Richard didn't even bother with interviews. He was spotted leaving his office with a cardboard box of personal items, refusing to answer questions. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Miller, do you regret trying to steal your sister-in-law's pension?" His only reply was slamming his car door. That night, I got an email from an unknown address. When I opened it, my jaw clenched. It was Charlotte. "Congratulations, Evelyn. You humiliated us. Are you happy now? Richard might lose his license, our friends won't talk to us, and we're being treated like criminals. I hope your precious reputation was worth destroying your family." I typed back one line. "Family doesn't destroy family for a mortgage payment." Then I closed the laptop. The fallout kept snowballing. Keller's law firm released a statement claiming they were misled by their clients and had no idea the medical records were falsified. It was a weak attempt at damage control. Miles told me quietly. Behind the scenes, Keller's being investigated. Bar complaints are piling up. A week later, the DA's office held a press conference. I watched on TV as they announced charges against both Charlotte and Richard: conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and filing false documents. Each carried potential prison time. The reporter asked, "Do you have a comment on the victim's resilience?" The DA replied, "Major Parker demonstrated incredible strength. Her case highlights the importance of protecting our veterans and elderly citizens from exploitation even from their own families." I felt a surge of vindication but also a heavy ache. This wasn't how I ever wanted to be noticed. Yet, if my fight could shine a light on a bigger problem, then maybe some good would come out of all the mess. 2 days later, I drove past Charlotte's house. Reporters still lingered on the sidewalk, and the blinds were drawn tight. The once pristine lawn was unkempt, toys scattered in the yard like nobody cared anymore. The image of control and order she had built so carefully was gone. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Seeing the cracks was enough. Back at my apartment, I found a letter slipped under my door. Handwritten, no return address. I opened it cautiously. It was from Richard. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I never wanted this to go this far." Charlotte pushed, and I went along. I was weak. "I know an apology won't fix the damage, but I hope one day you can forgive me." I read it twice, then set it on the counter. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe it was another attempt to save his own skin. Either way, it wasn't my problem to solve. That night, the evening news led with another headline: "Fraud Couple Faces Community Backlash." Clips showed protesters outside Charlotte's driveway holding signs: "Protect our veterans. Stop elder abuse. Shame on you." Watching it, I realized something important. They had tried to erase my voice, my autonomy, my dignity, but instead they had amplified it. Their own downfall had become my platform. I poured another bourbon and sat by the window, the city lights stretching out below. The collapse of Charlotte and Richard wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming the ground they'd tried to take from me. And I wasn't finished standing on it. The morning after the DA's press conference, I woke to a string of voicemails I hadn't expected. Some were from veterans I hadn't spoken to in years, others from strangers who'd seen my story on the news. They weren't calling to gossip. They were calling to thank me. One message stuck out. A woman's voice, shaky but determined. "Major Parker, I don't know you, but I watched your testimony. My brother's been trapped under a guardianship for 3 years, and it ruined his life. Seeing you fight back gave me hope. Thank you." I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the blinking red light. That was the moment it clicked. This fight wasn't just mine anymore. I called Miles. "I need to do something bigger than just clearing my name." He chuckled. "You already did. The DA's got them on the ropes. Keller's sweating. and every neighbor in town knows Charlotte's a fraud. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about all the people out there like me, people who don't have a lawyer or a Helen or a me to fight back. They're just stuck. What if I could give them the tools? Miles was quiet for a second. Then he said, "You're serious. Dead serious. I want to set up a foundation. A place where veterans and seniors can get legal help if their families try to pull this kind of scam. Valor and Justice. That's the name." There was a pause. Then Miles said, "That's the most Evelyn Parker thing I've ever heard. Count me in." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. Denise, my lawyer, volunteered to sit on the board. Helen offered to run the medical advocacy side, making sure shady doctors couldn't rubber stamp fake evaluations again. Even Lopez, the Marine from the veterans group, came on board. He said, "You've already started a movement. Might as well put a flag in the ground." The first press conference announcing Valor and Justice drew more cameras than I expected. I stood at a podium in front of a simple banner. Nothing flashy, just the name in bold letters. 3 months ago, I began. I found out my own family was plotting to strip me of my freedom, my dignity, and my pension. They failed because I had allies, evidence, and a platform to fight back. But many veterans and seniors don't. That ends today. Valor and Justice exists to make sure no one fights this kind of battle alone. Reporters scribbled furiously, flashbulbs popping. I told them about the hotline we were launching, the legal workshops we were planning, and the partnerships forming with advocacy groups nationwide. By the time I stepped down, emails were already pouring in from people wanting to help or needing it. Not everyone was clapping, though. Charlotte tried one last stunt. She released a statement through some second-rate blog, painting herself as the victim. "My sister has turned the entire community against us," she wrote. "This is a vendetta, not justice." The problem was, nobody bought it anymore. Her words were met with laughter and memes online. One comment summed it up perfectly. "Lady, you forged medical records. Sit down." Richard, on the other hand, went quiet. I heard through Miles that he'd taken a job 2 towns over, trying to keep his head down. Rumor had it, he was cooperating with investigators in exchange for leniency. Charlotte must have hated him for it. But their silence only made my voice louder. Invitations started rolling in local radio shows, veterans podcasts, even a national morning show. I didn't accept all of them, but the ones I did gave me a chance to spread the message. On one podcast, the host asked me, "What kept you going when it was your own family attacking you?" I thought about it for a second, then said, "The Army taught me a lot. How to lead, how to endure, how to fight. But the hardest lesson is that sometimes the people you expect to have your back don't. In those moments, you either fold or you stand anyway. I chose to stand." Emails flooded in after that episode, more stories, more people needing help. It was overwhelming, but it also proved the foundation wasn't just symbolic. It was necessary. At our first Valor and Justice workshop, we rented a community hall with creaky floors and bad lighting. 30 people showed up, some vets in worn ball caps, others elderly women clutching folders of paperwork. We walked them through their rights, how to spot fraud, how to document everything. Helen explained medical evaluations, Denise covered legal basics, and I just listened. One older man stood up at the end and said, "I thought I was crazy. My niece tried to get guardianship over me because she wanted my house. I didn't know anyone would believe me. Thank you." Hearing that, I felt something shift inside me. This was bigger than revenge. This was redemption, not just mine, but for every person who'd been silenced. The local news covered the workshop, calling it a grassroots push against guardianship abuse. The camera caught me shaking hands with the man in the ball cap, smiling for real for the first time in months. That night, I sat on my couch, the Valor and Justice hotline phone buzzing beside me. Miles had taken the first shift, cracking jokes between calls. Helen was working on a training manual. Denise was reviewing incoming case files. It felt like a unit again, like a team. For once, the battlefield wasn't sand or stone, it was community centers, courtrooms, and living rooms. But the fight mattered just as much. I poured myself a bourbon, the same way I had on those long nights at the motel. But this time, the drink didn't taste like survival. It tasted like victory. And as the city lights flickered outside my window, I realized something Charlotte would never understand. She tried to break me, but all she did was give me a mission. The courthouse looked different the second time I walked through its heavy wooden doors. Maybe it was me that had changed. The last time, I was fighting to prove I wasn't broken. This time, I was here to watch justice land on the people who thought they could break me. Charlotte and Richard sat at the defense table, both looking smaller than I remembered. No polished pearls, no smug smirks, just two people realizing the walls had finally closed in. Keller wasn't even with them anymore. He'd been suspended pending investigation. Their new attorney looked fresh out of law school, nervous as hell, like he knew he'd been handed a sinking ship. The district attorney opened with precision. He laid out the timeline of fraud, the falsified records, the guardianship petition, the forged doctor's letter. He played the audio of Charlotte's voice, clear and sharp through the speakers. Let her keep playing soldier. By the time she figures it out, the papers will be stamped. The gallery shifted uncomfortably as her words echoed. I watched her face tighten, pale under the fluorescent lights. Then came Richard's email about the mortgage. The prosecutor read it out loud, every word twisting the knife. Once guardianship is approved, we'll finally have access to her military pension. That'll cover the mortgage. The judge didn't even hide her disgust. Blatant motive, she said flatly, scribbling notes. Helen testified next, her calm voice cutting like steel. I personally evaluated Major Parker. She is of sound mind, competent, and fully capable of managing her affairs. Any claim to the contrary is fraudulent. Denise followed, outlining how the doctored video had been debunked by forensic experts. She ended with one sharp line. The only unstable thing in this case is the defendant's willingness to abuse the system for personal gain. Hell, by the time it was over, the evidence wasn't just overwhelming, it was suffocating. Charlotte kept her chin up, trying to look defiant, but her hands trembled in her lap. Richard just stared at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him whole. The judge delivered the verdict without hesitation. Charlotte Miller and Richard Miller, you are hereby found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and filing falsified documents. Sentencing will follow, but let me be clear. This court will not tolerate exploitation under the guise of guardianship. Case closed. The gavel struck, sharp as a gunshot. I felt the breath leave my lungs, a weight I'd been carrying for months finally lifting. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just stood tall, the way I'd been trained. Outside, the cameras swarmed again. Reporters shouted questions. Major Parker, do you feel vindicated? What message do you have for families in similar situations? I held my head high and answered simply. Justice was served. Freedom isn't just something you fight for overseas, it's something you fight for at home. And today, we proved it's worth every battle. The crowd clapped, some veterans in uniform saluting as I passed. For once, I didn't feel like a story on the news. I felt like myself again. That night, instead of bourbon, I poured a black coffee and sat in my office at the Valor and Justice Foundation. Our phones were ringing nonstop, families asking for help, veterans wanting to volunteer, donors offering support. Helen was in the next room, filing paperwork. Miles was manning the phones, cracking jokes to lighten the mood. Denise was already drafting new bylaws for oversight on guardianship petitions. It felt like a command post again. Only this time, the mission wasn't survival. It was protection. Richard eventually sent another letter from jail, more apologies scribbled on lined paper. I didn't respond. Charlotte never reached out at all. I didn't expect her to. Her pride was too thick, even in defeat. But none of that mattered anymore. Their story was over. Mine wasn't. Months later, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., speaking at a national conference on guardianship reform. Politicians, advocates, and veterans filled the room. Cameras rolled as I told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I was nearly silenced by the people who shared my last name. They forged records, twisted laws, and tried to convince the world I couldn't stand on my own. But the truth stood taller. And now, through Valor and Justice, we're making sure the system protects people, not predators. The applause was thunderous. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just free but powerful. When I walked off stage, a young soldier approached me. He couldn't have been more than 25. Uniform crisp, eyes steady. Major Parker, he said, my mom's going through something like this. Seeing you here gives me hope I can help her fight. I shook his hand firmly. You can, and you will. That's what we're here for. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window overlooking the Capitol Dome. I thought about Afghanistan, about convoy routes, about the brothers and sisters I'd served with. I thought about the motel where this all began, the flash drive under the sink, the nights I couldn't sleep. And I thought about Charlotte, how she'd underestimated me, how she'd mocked me, how she'd lost everything trying to take what wasn't hers. I didn't feel hatred anymore, just closure. She wanted to trap me, but instead, she set me free. She wanted to control my life, but instead, she gave me a mission bigger than her schemes could ever touch. I raised my coffee mug in a quiet toast to the night sky, to freedom, to justice, to never letting anyone take what we've earned. Then I turned off the light, finally ready to rest, not because I was hiding, but because the fight was won. In the end, what started as betrayal inside my own family turned into a lesson I'll carry forever. You can survive war zones and still find yourself blindsided in your own living room, but survival is only half the story. Choosing to fight back is the other half. I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed my dignity, my freedom, and a new mission. Charlotte and Richard thought they were writing my ending, but all they did was force me to write a beginning that was stronger, louder, and entirely my own. And that's the part that matters, because the hardest battles aren't always fought overseas. Sometimes they're fought at home, and sometimes the victory is simply refusing to be silenced.